Hello, I'm the Game Professor, and welcome to Games is Lit 101. I'm just gonna come right out and say that Nobuo Uematsu is my favorite soundtrack composer ever, of all time. The man is prolific beyond belief, composing huge soundtracks for huge Japanese RPGs and maintaining a distinct feel for each and every one of them. He's had a few subpar soundtracks, but when he's on, which is almost all the time, he is on, producing a huge quantity of some of the best music to ever appear in video games. Which is why I absolutely adore Final Fantasy music. And what's more iconic in Final Fantasy games than the song you hear playing in all those random battles? Okay, sure, that, but aside from that. Okay, maybe that too, but it's a big deal, is what I'm saying. Classic Final Fantasy titles had random encounters and turn-based battles, and every random encounter was accompanied by a song specifically composed for that game's normal, everyday fights, which means you heard this music a lot. Thankfully, like I said before, Uematsu is a master of his craft, and each and every one of these songs is catchy, exciting, and worth listening to over and over again. So today, just for fun, we're going to rank them, worst to best, with a few rules of course, the first of which being that we are just talking about the regular battle themes in these games. These are the songs that play during random encounters and such, so we're not talking about boss battle themes like Jenova, One-Winged Angel, Man with a Machine Gun, etc. Second, we're only going with main numbered Final Fantasy games for this list, but some later changes in the series essentially eliminated the concept of this single dedicated song that plays over your average battle scene. So specifically 12, 14, and 15 have real-time systems and don't really have like a dedicated space where battles take place in and a unique song plays, so they're not going to be represented on this list because they don't include the thing that we're talking about. In total, there are 12 Final Fantasy games we'll be talking about. And as always, this is kind of a subjective subject, so this list is going to be influenced by my own personal tastes and preferences. So if you have any disagreements with any of my choices here, feel free to just take to the comments, talk about your own favorite Final Fantasy battle themes, or just tell me how wrong I am. So without further ado, let's get into it. Number 12. Final Fantasy. I really like this song, so I was hoping before making this list that it wouldn't be at the bottom, but as I listened, it became clear that it did belong there. Not because it's bad, not a single one of these songs is bad, but because it's just relatively simple compared to the others. It's a great little tune to fight battles to, but it doesn't really exhibit any emotion or communicate much aside from its battle time. It's a great little piece of 8-bit music, and I fought hundreds of battles without ever getting tired of it, but Uematsu definitely outdid himself with each subsequent piece. Number 11. Final Fantasy VI. This one made me even sadder, because Final Fantasy VI is not only in the running for my favorite game of all time, but I love the soundtrack overall. Aria de Mezzocatere, which I'm sure I'm mispronouncing, is absolutely gorgeous. The Desperate Battle is my favorite boss theme in the series. My wife walked down the aisle to a piano rendition of Cella's theme. I love this soundtrack, but the battle theme, don't get me wrong, it's perfectly fine. Like I said, every song on this list is great. But one of my formative criteria for a good battle theme is whether it makes the player feel anything beyond just excitement. Any functional battle theme will make you all pumped for a fight, but the best ones are the ones that communicate some other feeling, something else about the game you're playing and the reason you're fighting. VI's battle theme just doesn't do that for me. Number 10. Final Fantasy II. Now, when I talk about battle themes communicating something beyond just exciting battle times, the battle theme from 2 is a pretty good example of what I mean. It's far from the series' most successful or sophisticated attempt, much like the game itself, right? But the whole soundtrack sets a darker tone for the game, and the battle theme is no exception, especially when it settles into its latter half. It's the right song for the game, and its abnormal sound and foreboding atmosphere make it an excellent effort for the series' second outing, even if the game itself isn't very good. Number 9. Final Fantasy X. actually one of those people who really loves Final Fantasy X, and I enjoy this battle theme a lot. I have fond memories of exploring Spira and planning out elemental attacks to this music. But while Final Fantasy X has plenty of dramatic moments and heavy thematic concepts, the general tone of the game is relatively lighthearted, and the battle theme reflects that. This might be one of the more personal reasons on the list, because while I enjoy the song a lot, lighthearted isn't really what I'm wanting when it comes to Final Fantasy battles. Some songs communicate desperation, others a tension between good and evil, and this one just kind of wants to have fun throwing beach balls at wild creatures. And that's fine, it's just not the way for a battle theme to get to the top of my list. Number 8. Final Fantasy XI. This is a weird one for me because this is one of the few Final Fantasy games I haven't played a single second of, so I'm just working with the music itself and not any first-hand knowledge of the game's tone or thematic content, but I really enjoy the music. I love what the strings in the background are doing, and I love the kind of regal, almost militaristic tone of the horns, which is further exemplified in the drums when the music slows down a bit. I may not know much of its context, but it's a pretty good battle theme, and I imagine it backs the game's battles quite well. Number 7. Final Fantasy III. This is the last NES song on this list, and for that matter, the last NES game in the series, and it really perfected the series' 8-bit battle song. It starts out a fun and exciting battle theme and plays with timing and staccato accents in some fun ways. The second movement in particular starts to bring more of its own unique feel to the song, going from the staccato accents of the first half to a smooth, more serious-sounding segment that goes a long way towards selling the more dangerous elements of their adventure that the first part sort of glosses over. It's nothing incredibly special, but it did really nail what made these battle themes great and sent the NES entries out with a bang. Number 6. Final Fantasy IV. Here's where things start getting really good. Final Fantasy IV is generally regarded as the first game in the series that really made a good effort at a meaningful story, and for good reason. It's hardly the pinnacle of the series' narrative achievements, but it's a significant movement from the first 3, and that's actually reflected in the battle theme in a cool way. Musically, it's fine, but not necessarily among my favorites. It starts off as a pretty good Final Fantasy battle theme, communicating some desperation and danger with its minor key and that little string interlude, before shifting into something a bit more uplifting. And then it actually fluctuates back and forth for a bit between that darker tone and the lighter before going back up into desperation to build back into the loop. Final Fantasy IV is, on a narrative level, primarily a journey from dark to light, with plenty of struggles between the two after a decisive turn towards light halfway through. In this way, the battle theme is actually a reflection of the story itself. That's the kind of thing that can take a decent Final Fantasy battle theme and elevate it to greatness in my mind. Number 5. Final Fantasy IX. This song, much like Final Fantasy IX as a whole, gets some nostalgia points. The series was trying to go back to its roots a bit with this entry, and this battle theme reflects that rather well. It starts off with the same intro from the first 6 games, and the song as a whole has a kind of electronic sound that's a little more reminiscent of the times before 7 and 8 went for a more orchestral feel. Much like the battle themes from those 2 games, it's relatively long and complex compared to those early songs, including a few different movements that go through foreboding, determination, desperation, hope. Like I said before, the thing that really elevates one of these battle themes in my mind is whether it makes you feel something more than just excitement. And this one does that pretty well, while also serving its game's overall purpose of calling back to its origins. Number 4. Final Fantasy XIII. This game gets a lot of hate, much of which is deserved and some of which really isn't, but this battle theme, it's awesome. In a pretty unique move for Final Fantasy battle themes, it actually starts off slow, quiet, and then it builds into something exciting before finally dropping right in on its energetic core theme. It's a great fit for the game's bright atmosphere and energetic combat animations. It doesn't really cover much emotional ground, but it does do something different that makes for a tense, exciting, very just energetic and bright battle theme that I never got tired of hearing no matter how many linear corridors I had to walk down. Number 3. Final Fantasy V. This game doesn't get much love in general, at least here in the States where it wasn't released until 7 years later, but it's a shame the soundtrack doesn't get more attention because it's one of Uematsu's best works, and the battle theme is no exception. When it comes to the feelings I want battle themes to express, the one that works most for me is probably best described as desperation. I want the music to communicate not just that we're fighting or that it's cool and I should have fun, but I want it to represent the struggle of the heroes. I'll get real invested in every battle if the music is making me feel like this is just one of a small part of a desperate struggle for the fate of the world. And of all the battle themes in the series, this one might communicate that best of all. The minor key in the horns, the catchy bass line, and I just cannot get enough of what these strings are doing in the background. Seriously, listen for them, it's fantastic. The song is just a perfect representation of how I want to feel when fighting monsters in Final Fantasy, and I can't get enough of it. Number 2. Final Fantasy VIII. I actually first heard this song at a live performance of Distant Worlds in San Francisco, and it captivated me, because it's one of the most intense, exciting battle songs I have ever heard. The entire thing is drenched in this sense of importance, of a driving need to win and continue with your quest. It has a more orchestral feel than previous ones, both because of the game's tone and because it's only the second Final Fantasy game to have access to software instruments this advanced. It's also in 5/4 time, which is really uncommon and interesting. I can't think of any other song in that time signature off the top of my head, and I'm pretty certain there's not a single other one of them in the Final Fantasy series. As Final Fantasy battle themes go, it's definitely the most intense, and it's both a joy to listen to and a serious mood setter for the game's battles. But it's also very focused in on that one emotional tone, which is why it didn't quite beat out my number 1 pick. Number 1. Final Fantasy VII. I know, I'm sorry, listing Final Fantasy VII as the best of anything is one of the most stereotypical things I could possibly do, but I listened and listened and listened, and I could not get over my love of this song. It starts in strong with blasts of trumpet immediately kicking you into fighting mode, then it maintains a relatively calm pace as it plays with the strings and bass horns to show you the battlefield and introduce your enemies. The whole intro sequence just works perfectly, thrusting you right into the excitement before holding you there while it establishes the scene. Then it starts building up with that same energy before letting itself fall back down for a second, continuing with the staccato horns and rising and falling strings before building up again, and each of these build-ups just gives me chills. It does 2 of those rises and falls before transitioning into a segment with a staccato flute, and I just cannot get enough of this bit. ultimately, it's at the top of this list because it's a perfect mix of the things I want from Final Fantasy battle themes. It's exciting enough to get me psyched for battle, and it communicates the intensity of a desperate struggle through multiple distinct musical movements. And I just cannot get over how much I love this song. And that's why it's my #1 pick out of all the Final Fantasy battle themes. So that's my list. I just love all of this music, and I had a really fun time listening through it all and trying to figure out how I felt about each piece and why I felt that way about it. So feel free to post your thoughts, whether you agree or disagree with any of my choices, in the comments. And if you want to follow me on Twitter or Facebook, check the description for links to both. This video is part of a project to help me get the show back on its feet with the upcoming analysis of Alan Wake. So keep an eye out for that coming up, as well as a few other videos in the meantime. And if you want me to keep being able to focus on this show, then check out the Patreon link in the description. I would really love to do this full time. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.